Greetings, dear friends. I present to your attention the most common malfunctions and breakdowns that occur on the Opel Insignia. As I said, many different engines can be seen under the hood of the Insignia, but today we will focus on the main mass units, those that are most often found. To begin with, there are some cells that unite all Opel Insignia gasoline engines. For example, this is a problem with fuel pipes. By the way, this particular car has one pipe that has already been repaired. It was repaired since the new pipe is also outrageously expensive. In addition to everything, there are also often torn crankcase ventilation membranes, departed oxygen sensors, cracked coolant tanks, which are best replaced with the lid. In theory, these are all little things that can be eliminated relatively inexpensively. The most interesting thing is revealed when you want to understand each of the units separately and in more detail. For a very short time, a tiny atmospheric 1.6 with 150 HP was put under the hood of this 1.5-ton carcass, A16XER. In common people his name is 16HEP. He is known for the Astra and many other Opel models. Accordingly, the weak points are still the same. The gaskets, primarily the valve cover, are flowing. Sometimes the phase regulator, the inlet, can crackle up to 100,000 km and ask for a replacement. Everything. The rest of the motor is problem-free and is ready to try to pull this hippo for a long time. 300 to 350,000 km, well, give or take, depending on many conditions. Naturally, the engine for such a car is openly retired, although, as you can see, the appearance is not at all old. So the 16XER did not last long in the aggregate line. All the same can be said about the atmospheric 1.8 140 HP A18XER. Oil leaks, oil cool leak, phase regulator crackle. The motors are structurally the same, only the 1.8 rides are a little more fun. And even more interesting are turbo engines. For example, a 1.6 LET belt unit with a volume of 1.6 for 180 horses with a triple K KO3 turbine. There's such a motor that stands under the hood of this particular car. In addition to the listed common source, here you can even run into the capital of the engine even on very meager runs. The problem is extremely common. More than half of the cars on sale with this motor are already off-powered, or they are in need of repair. In short, here the piston baffles burst between the rings. Just like that, they take and burst, lifting up the walls of the cylinders. And the main reason for what is happening, of course, is an engineering miscalculation. The distance between the piston grooves is too small, and the pressure on the rings is extremely high, even though the compression ratio here is only 8.8. Once you have unsuccessfully refueled or did not change the candles on time, get a capital. This motor simply hates detonation. First, subtle vibrations appear on the body, then can be felt in the cabin. Then they intensify. Then misfire rows appear and prepare replacement pistons. Once and for all, you can get rid of the problem only by installing expensive but reliable forged pistons. The whole thing will cost in a normal service from 100 to 150,000 rubles. By the way, this specimen did not have such problems with the engine and is not yet planned, and the mileage here, not much or less, is already 90,000 kilometers. It's just that the owner is very scrupulous about his iron horse. We change the oil on time, fill the 98th or 100th gasoline at proven gas stations, use the accelerator very humanly. Probably this could be called the guarantee of the health of the A16 LET, but, as many other owners claim, even love for the car does not necessarily help to avoid fate. However, just like the new GM firmware for the engine control unit. In the case of the 2-liter turbo engines A20NHT, 220 and 249 HP, the situation even more interesting. In addition to the same piston problems, there is simply a whole spectrum of turbocharging headaches added. I would even say that pressurization is the most troublesome thing. 2-liter uses a snail from Borg-Warner with a resource of about 100 tkm. Some have a little more, some have a lot less. In general, she does not stand out for her endurance at all. It's a common thing when a car with a mileage of 40 to 50,000 km has a decent amount of oil in the intake. In addition, the A20 NHT also has a naughty vacuum control valve. It just sticks. Sometimes you can hear a pulsating sound under the hood when you open the throttle. Also, you are guaranteed to have problems with underblowing or overblowing. This can happen because of anything. For example, because of the same valve or because of a burst in the cooler pipe. Yes, that happens too. In general, it will not be boring with a 2.0 gasoline engine for sure. For its truly impressive performance, it will make you pay with blood and sweat as it serves. Let's talk a little about diesel engines. There were 3 varieties of them. All of them are Bell 2-liter, differ only in the degree of forcing. This is our A20DT 130 HP, A20DTH 160 HP, and A20DTR 195 HP. All 3 heavy fuel counterparts have in common a chronic tendency to cranking sleeve bearings, that is, liners. Those who know about the problem pull off the pallet every 40 to 50,000 kilometers and change the liners in advance before the first knocks and a bunch of shavings appear in the oil. It is better not to indulge in cheap tuning here, as this will only increase the load on the bearings. Although I understand your temptation. After the chip, the diesel becomes just a cannon. A wedge here can also be caught from oil starvation due to a shrunken O-ring between the pump and the oil receiver. Therefore, during the preventive replacement of the liners, so to speak, the above gum is also changed at the same time. As for the turbo engines 2.8 A28NET 260 HP and the OPC SNI A28NER 325 HP, there is very little information on them, since there are, in principle, few such machines. It is only known that the chain rarely survives up to 70 tkm, and there is a rather weak fuel pump in terms of reliability, which sometimes does not reach hundreds. After restyling in 2013, the Opel Insignia was fitted with the new optics, bumpers, comfort options and much more. The atmospheric 1.8 turned out to be still worthy of transporting the Insignia, but the 1.6 Turbo 4 was significantly redesigned again by GM engineers. A16XHT, this is now the marking, received an increased compression ratio, 10.5. The block here remained cast iron, but in the timing drive now, instead of a belt, a chain, a tubing from Garrett was tied on. Unnecessary vibrations were removed when balanced shafts and equipped with direct injection, and at the same time 1.6 rolled down the hoses to 170 forces. But, in total, as strange as it may sound, the motor has become more high torque. How can this be? Yes, everything is simple, horsepower sells a car, but they still carry Newton meters. That is torque. The new 1.6 just got an even shelf of the moment, having secured an undermining almost from the very bottom. But what is important to us now when choosing a used Opel Insignia? It is important whether the errors have been corrected. So, the problems remained. All the same, pistons burst at low millage, everything is also forged, and there is still no unambiguous recipe for protection against breakage. It's sad, but we have to live on. Drive gearboxes. And let's start with the Japanese AF40 6-speed automatic TF80SC. Most of our Insignias ride with just such a checkpoint. It was installed until 2013, that is, before the restyling. And after the restyling until the 17th year, it was available for diesel engines. And what about her reliability? The box turned out to be sensitive to everything. In short, gentle, despite the fact that it is Asian. AF40 is afraid of overheating, and what is even more absurd, it is prone to overheating. With its chronic kicks and kicks, it forces you to install additional cooling radiators, or constantly wash and rinse the main radiator. In addition, constant leaks in the oil cooler tubes are added here, and at the same time it is sensitive to the oil level, and it is better to eliminate each leakage of the pipes immediately after setting the level on the computer. By the way, dear Opel Wody, the same box was installed on many Volvo models, and Volvo Wody know very well what this machine is with, so that it delivers a minimum of inconvenience. Believe me, if used correctly, the AF40 can serve for a long time and without problems. After restyling, the Japanese engine under the hood of versions with 1.6 was replaced with a product of its own, partly with the participation of Ford development called 6T45. We will not talk a lot about it, since the box is known from the Astra J and the Chevrolet Cruze. Known for its weak Chinese iron, including broken of clutch baskets. It is also known for the sensitivity of the valve body to the purity of the oil, so it is better to change the lubricant every 40 TkM, no later. The most reliable automatic machine in the Opel Insignia lines works with 2-liter gasoline engines in versions after restyling. This transmission is labeled 6T70 and was also developed in collaboration with Ford, but much earlier. It was on its basis that GM Sheep tried to create the 6T30, 40, 45. The paradox is that 6T70 is much more hardy than all of them taken. For you to understand, the same box was installed by the Ford Explorer with its V-shaped 3.5. That's all you need to know about her. If the Explorer had no problem with its weight and torque, then the D-Class sedan, and even more so. This test car is generally simple with reliable mechanics, and there are particularly no problems with the owners. The only thing that can be annoying is that sooner or later you will have to change the clutch basket, usually about 150,000. And if your mechanic does not like the state of the flywheel, then you will have to pay a lot for it, since it is not an ancient ordinary here, but a dual mass one. By the way, on our test car the clutch release bearing rustled to 90,000 kilometers. You can listen to the sound on the video and the very beginning of the article. Not critical yet, but you can already prepare for replacement. On the test car we have front wheel drive. There's nothing to talk about it. There are no weak points here. However, as you know, there are Opel Insignia with all-wheel drive, and there were two versions of the delivery of torque to the rear wheels. One conventional, with the Helix clutch, 4 generations, the other with the same Haldex clutch, but in addition with an optional rear differential lock. If you change the oil in the clutch and differential on time and do not force much on the autodrome, then you will not have problems with all-wheel drive. You will only have to keep an eye on the drive oil seals, as they tend to snot. If malfunctions with the clutch still occur, then contact the Wagovsky service. They know what to do with Haldex. The suspension design here is relatively simple. A full-fledged MacPherson in front of one lever, a multi-link in the back. In general, the chassis is reliable and the first 100 TkM may not require investments at all, with the exception of some trifles like stabilizer bushings. Shock absorbers, silent blocks of levers, all, during normal handling, calmly overcome the Mach and 150 TkM. That is, there are no pronounced weak points here, and the suspension usually does not fall out before a reasonable time. Further disclaimer, if you do not have FlexRide. FlexRide is a system that allows you to vary the stiffness of the suspension. Owners of cars with such a suspension are straining more, since one shock absorber costs 25,000 per piece. In the original there are such shock absorbers. That is, if you want to update the suspension a little, unfasten the Sotochku only for the sections. It makes me madly glad that they leave the prescribed 100 TkM, and if something happens earlier, it is mainly due to the rotten wiring between the actuators on the racks and the control unit. The steering rack did not bother everyone, but there are still a number of systematic problems. For example, it happens that various types of seals flow, As we have already said, everything is smooth with Opel's rubber technology. There were cases when the rail began to play ahead of schedule, but the main thing for us that this unit is being repaired, and relatively inexpensively. Therefore, when choosing a used Opel Insignia, it is definitely not worth giving up the car because of a knock when shaking the steering wheel. In other words, some problems with electronics can also be taken lightly. Like many other Germans, Opel Insignia also allows itself to present the owner with something not very pleasant. For example, a breakdown of the heating of the front seats, parking sensors or the failure of the button to open the trunk lid is considered a common problem for them. By the way, this car has already changed the button for the fifth door and seat heating. Presumably, the Insignia's electrical problem will directly depend on how fat your equipment is. Of course, the less equipment, the more reliable the car, but everyone wants comfort options, so you need to be prepared for the fact that this or that system will have some kind of malfunction. In general, the Opel Insignia distinguished itself with its various control units. For example, ECUs, or the tire pressure monitoring system, control of dead zones, control of adaptive lighting, AFL, can be buggy here. You should not worry too much about this, since most of the listed troubles can be eliminated here by flashing the blocks to the latest software versions. General Motors, as the car was released, changed programs several times for different units, including for engine controls units, by the way, trying to kill the source with pistons listed by us. Therefore, after buying a used Opel Insignia, immediately after replacing consumables, we go to a specialized service to update the software of everything and everyone. What I have always liked about Opel cars is the comfortable and quite decent interiors. The materials here are of normal quality, as with Toyota there will be no problems. Before time, nothing wipes, does not shuffle, and by its first 100 Insignia looks 100%, in the good sense of the word. All this information about the problems of the Opel Insignia is exhausted. If you know more or do not agree with what you heard, I'm waiting for you in the comments.